Knowing enough to know in the moment, that heated, that angry, that drunk, to know enough to go to bed and just be quiet so that when the police came, hopefully I wouldn't be in trouble. Some of you need to really take responsibility. Think about it. Exhausted, it's the middle of the night, like whatever, 2 a.m, wasted, but still know enough to understand what I should have been doing.
People getting divorced
tearing their families apart, coasting through marriage.
or fighting their way through it. I'm Cass.
I'm Kathryn.
We came back from the depths of hell to save our abusive, our toxic marriage.
We're Moral Marriage.
Let's flip divorce statistics with the new marriage.
And this one's going to be a good one because although not everybody, I think, has had to call the police on their partner, I think we hear about it enough. And I think a lot of times people should probably call the police. But this is after a lot of reflection, after my restraining order, after a year of probation, after a lot of personal growth and success moving forward as the man I am now, years later reflecting. It wasn't always that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk first about what happened the night you had to call the cops.
All right. So first of all, it was 2018, January 2018. So we've got a lot of years that have gone by. So I just want to make sure that you guys all know that this didn't happen like yesterday or like
I hope not.
yeah. It was 2018. So what happened the night I had to call the cops? Okay. Well, we were fighting as we always
As
were.
per usual,
And
daily fights.
yeah, and if I can say the reason that he's asking me to recap it is because he doesn't quite remember how it went down.
I only remember some details at the end. So you go first.
Yeah. So I haven't really stewed on this, so I don't have, and we never talk about this before we record. So forgive me, I don't know a lot of the details. But the gist of it is that we were in a really big fight and he was attack, and I would get really defensive, but I remember I attacked back. And I remember what I said, but I don't think it's important and I don't think it's beneficial for you guys to know what I said. But I remember what I said and I knew that it would make him fly off the handle. So in my mind, because I was so pissed off and I was so hurt, I said something that I knew was just going to drive him over the edge. However, I didn't know how far over the edge it was going to drive him. And I was standing in the living room. He was standing kind of on a raised, it was like we had a sunken living room. I was in the living room. He was up on the little
Step.
the step.
Yep.
And he immediately started throwing. We had a lot of supplements. We were in the fitness and nutrition industry for a very long time. We still are a little bit. And so we had supplements lined up on the counter and he just started
Whipping 'em.
throwing them at me. So just throwing them.
At you or around
But just
you?
around.
Yeah.
Around,
Yeah.
I think if you wanted to hit me, you would have hit me. But
Yeah.
it was, so you weren't trying to hit me, but you were throwing them like
I was
in my
definitely
general
trying to scare
vicinity.
the shit out of you.
Definitely trying to scare me.
I was breaking stuff too, I remember, but I don't remember what.
I think it was only the things that you were throwing that you
okay.
were breaking. And then,
Of course, screaming at the top of my lungs.
yes, screaming. And so I was obviously backing away. When someone's throwing things at you, you back away. And so I ended up going back to the couch and I can't remember if I was like, just stop it, go to bed. I don't remember exactly what I was saying, but he came over to the couch and it was terrifying. He mounted the couch, so arms on the back of the couch, legs around me, and started thrashing his body back and forth. If I didn't lean back as far as I could, he would have headbutted me right in the face. Now, that was not his intention. He was not trying to physically assault me, but he was trying to get as close to physical assault, high levels of physical intimidation to scare me and he was out of his mind with anger.
And I think it's important to understand because I think so many, at least I've heard of men in my program that have done it and their wives do sort of similar things to them. Obviously, usually it's not the same couple, but
Very rarely.
it's not necessarily as aggressive, but the point is just like you used with your words, you knew you would hurt me. The point is anything like this throwing or thrashing, or I broke the headrest that
You broke the couch that I was sitting
yeah,
on.
I broke the headrest right off the couch. It was all the same sort of thing. Why aren't you listening to me? You can't hear me. You're screaming louder and you're saying worse things and you're being physical and it's yes. Anyways, you said I have to call the cops.
Yes. So I don't know if it was while he was thrashing. Obviously, it's a little bit of a blur. There was alcohol involved. It was a huge fight. I didn't have my phone in my hand while he was thrashing. So I don't know what happened after he stopped the thrashing, but there was still screaming. And I said, that's it. I'm going to call the cops. And as soon as I said that, he said, no, I'm going to bed.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, oh man, I could get in a lot of trouble now.
And so, and I was already dialing 911. He said, Kathryn, I'm going to bed. I'm going to bed. And so I'm on the phone with 911 and I said, he said he's going to bed. And they were like, do you believe he's going to bed? And I was like, I don't know. This is terrifying. And so they sent the police.
And I was in bed when the police arrived, but it's too late now.
Yeah.
So where we were, and this would be different every province, every state, but where we were, because she called the cops, because of the nature of the house, because of the nature of the couch, it's automatic charge for assault to protect you.
Yeah, I didn't even have a choice. The laws we were in Alberta at the time, the laws in Alberta state that they have to place a mandatory restraining order when it is a domestic, because in domestic assaults or disputes, they cannot, basically my understanding was they can't trust the woman to tell the truth in case she's
afraid,
or she's being threatened, and so it's just automatic restraining order.
Yeah, so it could be different in where you are, but I want to make sure when we come back to that night, I want to make sure that we talk about, you see, I knew enough to know that I had to change my behavior in the moment so I wouldn't get in trouble with the police. Okay, we'll come back to that.
And also, I knew enough about what I was doing, what I was saying, because I knew that I would really antagonize him if I said what I said. So we're both at fault in this situation. It just so happens, and this happens in a lot of situations, so I don't want to downplay domestic violence at all. But a lot of times in the situations that we work with, and we do work with domestic violence, but we work with something called situational domestic violence, which is what we went through. We don't work with what's called characterological domestic violence, which means it's in your character to be violent. He's not characterologically domestically violent. And I definitely am not. But I knew that if I said what I said, I could antagonize him, and then that pushed him as far as he could be pushed. So both of us are at fault. It's not everything that he did, he has to take responsibility for, but I can also take responsibility that I was aware of what I was doing. So I'm not going to say it's my fault that he like almost headbutted me. It's not my fault that he threw things at me, but I do play a piece. And in the situations we work with, at least with the women that I work with, if they've been in a violent situation, I make sure I ask what was happening. Was your husband being antagonized? Were you antagonizing your husband? Were you instigating? And almost every time they will say, well, yes, I got to push to my edge and then I called him this, and I knew that like I shouldn't have done that as soon as I did it because I knew that I pushed him over the edge. Most women in the situations that we work with, well, hear me clearly, it's not every situation, but it's very, the women have a big part.
I think that's the most important takeaway for you guys right now, is to be aware of the situation. We talk a lot about taking responsibility for ourselves. Men think I'm throwing them under the bus, but no, it's because I took responsibility for me. Just like you would be having the same conversation with women who are upset. And you're saying, well, no, I'm taking responsibility right here, right? I can't be like that. So you need to sort of dig a little bit deeper there. Now, there's more. So that then triggered a lot more crap for the next couple of years. I was afraid of the police deep down. I would get anxiety when I saw sirens heard sirens or saw lights. I would always throw in your face, how could you do that? I would never, blah, 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 blah. And I wanted to bring that up because whether or not she calls the police or he calls the cops, like, the end of the day, like, listen, that's me saying, how could you do that? I'm so great. I'm so wonderful. You. And it perpetuates the cycle of blaming each other, of attacking each other and having to defend yourself, instead of going, well, yeah, man, I really shouldn't have got that aggressive. I really should have done things differently.
Right. So what he's trying to say is, he was saying it was my fault that I called the police, rather than taking responsibility for what he did that made me call the police. Now, I am owning my side of it, so it makes it a little bit different. But most of the time, when we see this, there is a level of anger in the man saying, how could you do this to me? How could you call the police? When in reality, I antagonized him at the point that I called the police, but I could have called the police years prior.
Oh, yeah.
Months prior. Minutes prior to it actually exploding. It would have justified me calling the police multiple times. It just so happened that at that moment, I felt like it was so out of control, and I could have been unsafe.
And this is really important. This is a really valuable lesson, because, we're going to do the next episode on porn, but, the amount of times I've heard men say, well, you make me use porn because you don't want me, right? And like, this is just another example of where you're not taking responsibility for what you can do to save your marriage, to level up the marriage, to show up in your marriage. And so you're just blaming your partner, you know? Now, I wanted to touch before we end this episode on knowing the difference, knowing that you were going to push my buttons, you knowing that, and I did a lot of that too. Oh boy, can call you X names and stuff like that. And, you know, knowing enough to know in the moment, that heated, that angry, that drunk, to know enough to go to bed and just be quiet so that when the police came, hopefully I wouldn't be in trouble. Some of you need to really take responsibility. Think about it. Exhausted, it's the middle of the night, like whatever, 2 a.m, wasted, but still know enough to understand what I should have been doing, but never thought about it until you called my bluff. I'll say called my bluff, okay?
And until there was another party that was going to be involved. So it didn't take me seriously. Mm-hmm. But when there was someone that you need to take seriously, you knew the difference and took it seriously.
I think that's the most valuable lesson that we can leave you with here today, everybody, is that if you can take a minute when you're worried about protecting you and think about protecting your partner, think about protecting the marriage, the future, your children. You know, we had Castle there with us then, mm-hmm. right? And, you know, like, if you can think about it like that, who am I defending? Us or me? Then maybe you can start to make some of the right choices. Mm-hmm. All right, guys, we'll see you next time.